everybody. Welcome. Glad that you're here. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. So let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everyone. Glad you're here on a lovely Saturday evening. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation, just like we always do. Glad you're here. Hope you're enjoying everything. And, you know, it is November. Is this the first weekend of November? I think this is the first weekend of November. We're heading towards a new year. So good things are happening. The world situation is on the brink. The government is shut down. I mean, a lot of people are hungry and oh boy, but we remain optimistic. We had a great CPI meeting this afternoon with multiple new members attended. 2 new members were there. It was really, really great. So yeah, we're going to do things the normal way we always do. First, I'll be doing my opening remarks, then the roll call, then I'll answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if there's something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the show, send a question. You can send a Rumble rant. You can cash at me at CalebMoppin22. But the absolute best way to send your question would be to buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions. It's very quick. You can go as long as you want. It's great. It's really, really a great way to do it. So buy me a coffee is the best way. Now, in terms of announcements, you can become a member of the Center for Political Innovation. It's going to be great. And we are building for a big event to kick off the new year. The Earth is awakening. America should join. It's going to be great. It'll be in Newark, New Jersey, near the Newark airport. It's going to be great. Music, full buffet for everyone who attends. People who attend will get a copy of the book that we published of last year's convention. There'll be music, presentations. It's going to be a great day. It's really going to be a great day, and you don't want to miss it. So if you would like to attend this event that we've got coming up, you can go ahead and register on the Eventbrite. So yeah, that should be good. And, right now our outreach campaign that is aimed at food banks, is going on, and Gabby is going out there and Penny in Minneapolis and the LA team and all of that. So good things are happening. And our organization is marching ahead just like always. And I'm overjoyed. We got Khrushchevism reading groups going on. We have got solidarity with the Uhuru movement. I mean, our organization is doing tremendous work. So become a member, join on the CPI website. That's a great way to get involved. And register for the event. Join us in New Jersey. Eat some of that good food, listen to the good music, participate in our long Q&A session, listen to some good speeches. It's going to be a great day in Newark, New Jersey. So register and be there. Now, we're going to follow our usual format tonight. And our usual format is first I give my opening remarks. Then from there, we do the roll call, and I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your questions. It is your questions that make the second half of the show what it is. I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. So if you got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of our show, send a question. Send it via Rumble Rant. You can cash at me at CalebMoppin22. The best way, the absolute best way to send questions for the second half of the program is to buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send your questions. So yeah, with no further ado, I'm going to jump into it. So last night, somebody asked me about this book, The Assassination of Julius Caesar by Michael Parenti, one of my favorite books. And I referenced part of the reason that I like this book is it's not simply history, it's what they call historiography. Right? If you were a history major in college, not only do you take courses on the history of Europe, the history of Asia, modern history, classical history, you also take courses on what they call historiography, which is how history is researched, the method for researching history. Method is important. And it's been said before that a great leader doesn't simply teach you what to think or tell you what to think. They teach you how to think. And that tonight, for my opening remarks, I thought I would just jump into learning to think as a hero thinks. Imagine that. Think as heroes think. That's what I called the stream for tonight. And the first thing to say is actually one of the most important points, which is how dare you? How dare you, Caleb, try to tell us how to think? And that's the point. How dare I? How dare I? How dare I tell you how to think? Well, you don't have to do what I say. And maybe it sounds grandiose for me to get on here and tell you how heroes think. Maybe it sounds grandiose and self-important, but I'm doing it anyway because I think I have something important to contribute to the conversation. And that is one of the first points. You have to dare. You have to be willing to go out of your comfort zone. You have to be willing to endure other people's disapproval. I think I can show you a new way to think. And I think I am qualified to do so. And I'm willing to endure somebody on the other side of the screen saying, who does he think he is? Well, I think I'm somebody who has something to say. Now, if you want to know my resume, I'm from a small town in Ohio. And when I was in college, I got involved in the struggle against police brutality. I videotaped 2 women being beaten up by the Cleveland Police Department. My video got them acquitted in juvenile court. I was part of the Occupy Wall Street movement. I was the press spokesperson for the International Action Center of Ramsey Clark during the Occupy Wall Street protests, representing them on international television. I risked my life on a humanitarian mission in 2015 that created an international incident, bringing medical aid to the nation of Yemen on the Iran Shahid, which was a Red Crescent Society of the Islamic Republic of Iran ship. I have been an international TV broadcaster, appearing on different TV networks for the last decade. I've interviewed and interacted with multiple presidents. I sat down with Ibrahim Raisi, the Iranian president at the United Nations, for an exclusive interview. I've had a direct interaction with Russian President Vladimir Putin. I've had one-on-one conversations with the son of the president of Nicaragua. I asked Donald Trump a question at a press conference that he answered. I've done some stuff. I've been some places, done some things. I wrote a book that created a big scandal and was a big topic of conversation during the 2024 election cycle. A book that I wrote about Kamala Harris was banned from Amazon, and then it exploded and sold like crazy. I've done some shit. Been some places, gotten some stuff done. If you want to know more about who I am, you can visit my website, calebmaupinbooks.net. So I think I'm qualified to tell you how to think, not to tell you what to think, but to tell you how to think, to teach you methods of thought that can enable you to do great things. I feel like I've done some great things in my life. Am I flawed? Sure. Just like any of you, but I feel like I'm qualified to put forward some thoughts toward thinking as heroes think. So on that note, we'll jump right into it. Think as heroes think. The first thing I want to say is that your thoughts are the most important thing that you have. Your thoughts belong to you. And it is your thoughts that shape your behavior, your interactions, your life goals. Your thoughts are really important. Your thoughts are really, really, really important. And we forget that. In fact, a lot of people don't even realize how important their thoughts are. Your thoughts are very, very, very important. The way you think, the way you interact with the world, the way you think about yourself, the way you deduce information, the way you make plans, that's really, really important. And it's your job to own the most important thing you have, which is your thoughts. Because many people, they have their thoughts and they just think about whatever. They just go with the flow. They don't think about how to think. And as a result, they just think whatever. And they're missing out. And I think the first thing is you need to consciously decide to take ownership of your thoughts. Decide that you will think in a way that will lead you to do important and successful things. You need to decide that I'm going to think in a way that is best for me, that leads to my happiness, that leads me to connect with other people, that leads me to learn. You have to make a decision. You have to own your own thoughts. And your thoughts are yours. You can think however you want. You can't say whatever you want. If you say the wrong thing, you might offend people. You can't do whatever you want, but you can think whatever you want. Your thoughts belong to you. Your thoughts are your own. However, if you don't take ownership of your thoughts and you don't take control and say, I am going to think as I choose to think, you're missing out. And just because your thoughts are your own doesn't mean you should think whatever comes naturally to you. It means that you should consciously make a decision. I am going to think in a way that is successful. I am going to think in a way that is important. And there's a matter of input-output, right? And this is tricky a little bit. But, I told you all years ago that I start every day by listening to classical music, and I end every day by listening to classical music. I started doing that about 12 years ago, and it was a big game changer in my life. It made me a much happier person, a much more clear-headed person, because every morning I took my phone out and I put on some classical music. Every night before I went to sleep, I took my phone out, I put on some classical music, and it just kind of centered me. And that thought is very much a matter of input-output. If you watch television all day, what you've seen on television impacts how you think. If you read books all day, what you read in those books impacts how you think. If you're around other people, the people you're around impact how you think. Human beings were like synthesizers, right? We take our environment and we take it into our mind and we process it, and our creativity and what comes out of us is largely us taking in the environment around us, synthesizing it, processing it, and regurgitating it. And if you can understand that that's what you do, you need to consciously take control of the process. Decide what you're going to consume, decide what you're going to watch, what you're going to listen to, who you're going to spend your time with. Make a decision for yourself, but make that decision not based on whatever. Make that decision based on what you want to be, who you want to be, what you want to think, how you want to see the world, how you want to interact with other people. Take ownership of your mind. And it's weird because, in a way, this sounds authoritarian, this sounds totalitarian, but it's up to you. This is actually the greatest exercise of individual choice and freedom that you can make. Freedom is not just going along with whatever's happening. Freedom is not just going with the flow. Freedom ultimately means making a decision and exercising and enhancing your own willpower in order to carry out that decision, saying, I want to be this. I want to do this. I want to be this way, and doing it. That's freedom. That is the ultimate freedom. If someone else comes to you and tells you how to be, that's not freedom. But if you just go along with the flow and you don't take ownership, that's not really freedom. Freedom is asserting individual willpower. And if you want to think as heroes do, as people who change history do, as great individuals who have changed the course of history do, you have to make a decision to take ownership of your thoughts and of your mind. And one thing that's important to do, and this might sound contradictory, is in order to do this, you have to get over the arrogant individualism that gets in the way of this. Now, that sounds contradictory, and so many things in our modern world are contradictory. But I'll tell you a story. When I was a high school student, I was very interested in socialism and communism. And one summer, I signed up for a creative writing workshop at Wright State University in Southern Ohio. I went to the creative writing workshop, and there's one of the teachers at the creative writing workshop introduced himself by saying, I am a socialist. I was very excited. Wow, this guy calls himself a socialist. And so I said, are you a Trotskyist? And he said, no. I said, are you a democratic socialist, like a social democrat? He said, no. I said, like, what kind of socialist are you? He said, I have my own ideas. I have my own ideas. I've thought of socialism in my own way. That's the kind of socialist I am. And I said, well, geez, are there any socialist books that you can recommend? Nope. I have my own ideas. Are you a member of any socialist group? No. I'm just, And I found that to be really, really, really annoying. This guy and his intellectual arrogance claimed to be a socialist, but he could not tell me where he fit into the socialist movement. He could not point me toward any socialist writers because he thought for himself. And I find that there's so much of this. So many times I'd be passing out leaflets and I would try to hand someone a leaflet. No, I can't read that because I think for myself. And it's really annoying. And it is part of this culture that we have that in order to be a great individual, in order to be a free-thinking American, you can't have the humility to admit that you learned anything from anyone else. And that might seem individualist and bold on the surface, but it's not. Because all the people who think for themselves think the exact same thing. And it's a really, really obnoxious thing. If this guy had said, I'm a socialist, and I said, are you a Trotskyist? And he'd said, well, I've read some Trotsky. I agree with this. I don't agree with that. I would have respected that. If I had said, are you a socialist? And this guy would have said, sure, I really like Bernie Sanders. I would have respected that. But nope, I'm a socialist. And I have my own ideas. I think for myself. It's the most annoying thing. What that really means is he just picked a label and didn't think about it very deeply, didn't dig into it, didn't really do any serious research, and was just, a conforming individual who happened to pick a colorful label for himself. And that arrogant individualism is everywhere. If you really want to be a hero, you have to learn. You have to learn. And you have to join. And you have to investigate. And you have to make mistakes. And that people have this arrogance in their minds that in the name of being a great individual, I won't learn from anybody. I won't investigate anything. I won't join any group or any organization. I won't go out and take any risks or make any mistakes. I will just sit here and pretend I'm smart. Now, I see this a lot, especially with young men. And a lot of them think it's like a pride thing. I can't admit that I learned from anybody. I can't humble myself by being part of a process with somebody else. And they think that it makes them really strong. And it's actually an expression of weakness. That's what it is. Because all the great people of history learned from other people. And all the great people of history joined mass movements. And all the great people of history took risks. And all the great people of history made mistakes and learned from their mistakes. And that this pride that people have, this weird individual arrogance of like, I'm so free thinking, I can't learn from anybody, I can't join anything, I have to preserve my free thinking individualism. It is a weird aspect of Americans, right? Americans, I think Mark Twain said America is a great country because Americans have the ability to think whatever they want and say whatever they want, but they have the common decency to do neither. And he was, of course, being ironic there. But there's something about this. It's like if you were to actually take a serious stand on an issue, if you were to actually investigate, if you were actually to go against a prevailing view, somehow then you lost your individuality. Well, no, that's what great individuals do, is they investigate. They learn about things. They join organizations. They take sides. They get involved. They go out and sometimes they learn in the process and they make a mistake and they change their position. That's what great people do. And that if you're sitting there going, I'm great, and you don't do any of that, you're not really great. And in fact, one thing that all the great people of history have done is they've learned from as many places as they can. A lot of people have this bias in their minds. I can only learn from people who agree with me. I can only learn from people that I like. I can only learn from my friends. I can only learn from Americans. I can only learn from... And that's not the correct way of doing things. In fact, you can learn a lot from your enemies and your opponents and people that are going against you. If there's someone that you really don't like, someone you really don't like, but they're very popular, find out why. Right? You already don't like them, so their negative attributes are very apparent to you, but some people do like them. And so it's a challenge. And if there's somebody out there you really don't like, but they really have a mass appeal, go figure out why they are liked. Find out what it is that you don't like, you don't see that these other people see. Find out what these other people find winning about the other person. And if there's somebody out there who does not like you and is critical of you, in a way, you're lucky, because you will hear from that person, if they're really honest, they will point to some of the weaknesses that maybe your best friends and admirers and people who love you won't see. And that often we refuse to learn from people that we don't like, right? We say, oh, we don't like this rival we have. We don't like this person who doesn't like us. And so any knowledge we could gain, any insight we could gain from that person. Look, Hitler was an awful person, mass murdering dictator. But you know what? If the sky was blue and Hitler said the sky is blue, that did not make the sky not blue. People that are bad and flawed and evil can still say true things. And that often we get it into our minds that we can only learn from people we like. We can only learn from people that are sympathetic or friendly to us, who like us. We can only learn from people that are similar to us. We can only learn from our own time or our own point of reference. You have to be able to learn from anybody. And that is a really important thing. The most successful people in this world tend to learn from anywhere they can. They tend to gain any insight that they can get. Now, I mentioned before that human beings are like synthesizers, right? That we're kind of a product of our environment. And that gets back to the whole quote from Friedrich Engels that I frequently will reference on these streams, right? Friedrich Engels said, the difference between man and other animals is that other animals simply interact with their environment, but man masters his environment and forces his environment to serve him. And this distinction sets man apart from all other animals, and that it is labor that brings about this distinction, that human beings, we interact with our environment and we change it. That the world goes into our minds, and we take the world and we alter the world around us and we change it. And that is a uniquely human thing. No other species can do it. And I've been talking a lot about living biologically, right? That's a phrase we've used in CPI, that, an ant is alive, a tree is alive, a sheep is alive, a weed in your garden is alive, but it's not alive in the human sense because it doesn't master its environment. It doesn't dig with big questions. It just kind of goes along with things, right? It avoids pain, it seeks out pleasure, and it just goes along a predetermined path, never making conscious decisions, never asking big questions. Why am I here? Just kind of going through the motions of the world. And we call that living biologically, because something that does that is biologically alive, but it is not spiritually alive. It is not alive in the truly human sense. It is only living in the biological sense. It is not living in the spiritual or the human sense. It is living biologically. And there's a quote about this that really illustrates the exact same point, that I would like to put on the screen for you. If I can just fit it all onto the screen. Hold on, right? Hold on. Just gonna put the quotation on the screen for you so you can see it, because it's a good quotation. If I can just, right. If I can just cram it all into one. This is annoying. Okay, how do I do this so that it all fits on the screen here? Just trying to figure out how to get this quotation on the screen. Hold on. Hold your horses. All right. It is a great quotation from Wallace Wattles, and I'm just trying to figure out how to put it all on the screen. And the program I'm using is not being cooperative. Here, let me just put it this way. Thanks for all being patient with me. Sometimes quotations are worth waiting for. Not always, but sometimes. And I think this one is worth waiting for. And there we go. There we go. Now I've got the quotation, and it can all fit on the screen very, very well. All right. It's a long quotation. That's why it took me a while to put it on the screen. All right. Are we ready? All right. Let's put this quotation on the screen. It's a great quotation, and it just really illustrates what I'm trying to get at. When I talk about living biologically, what am I getting at? What am I talking about? This is what we're talking about. I love this. This is Wallace D. Wattles. He writes, there are two mental attitudes that a man may take. One makes him like a football. It has resilience and reacts strongly when force is applied to it, but it originates nothing. It never acts of itself. There is no power within it. Men of this type are controlled by circumstances and environment. Their destinies are decided by things external to themselves. The principle of power within them is never really active at all. They never speak or act from within. But the other attitude makes a man a flowing spring. Power comes out from the center of him. He has within him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. He radiates force. He is felt by his environment. The principle of power in him is in constant action. He is self-active. He hath life in himself. And that's Wallace Wattles basically explaining what I'm getting at. Some people are living biologically. They're like a football. And they're pushed around and they react to the world around them. And some people have the power of life within them. And they force the environment to react to them. And the people who change the world, the great heroes of history, are people who force the environment to react to them, force the environment to serve them, who assert their willpower onto the world. And it's a challenging thing to do because everything is being done in our world today to just lull you to sleep. With our phones, with social media everywhere, with the popular culture the way it is, everything is being done to just kind of lull you into this biological state of existence. And it's almost a daily battle to assert your ability to be this way, to be like a flowing spring, to let power come out from the center of you. But that's really what being heroic is about. And I can point to some great examples of this, but really one thing that it really gets down to is passion. Passion. There's something that people believe they say one should never be a fanatic. Have you ever heard this before? Never be a fanatic. Never be fanatical about anything. Well, if I had a heart attack and they called 911 and I was being rushed to the hospital, I would want the doctor who worked on me to be a fanatical doctor. I would want somebody who knew the human body and human anatomy fanatically, and they knew just how to give me exactly the right treatment to make me better. And if I was going into business and starting a business, and I wanted to market my business, I would want to hire a fanatical marketer. Somebody who knew exactly how to market my business and get me as many customers and make me as much money as possible. And great things in this world are achieved by fanatics. But there is this socialization that we all go through that says, don't be fanatical. That's weird. Well, being a hero is weird. Most people are not heroes. Most people don't have a great impact on the world around them. A lot of people are just going through the motions. But if you want to be heroic, you have to learn to be a fanatic. And whatever this social stigma, don't be a fanatic, don't believe in stuff, don't be passionate, don't dig into issues, don't think deeply about things, whatever that is, you have to overcome that. And you have to let yourself learn to be passionate about what you want to do. And you have to let yourself dig in and become fanatical. And that's part of that, getting over that arrogant individualism. It's part of how dare you. It's part of everything I've been saying so far tonight, is that if you really want to change the world, you cannot be a conformist. You cannot be the type who is afraid to stand out. The people who change the world stand out. The people who change the world are outliers. They are the exception. They are not the rule. And if you're not willing to be the exception, and if you're too scared to be passionate, if you're too arrogant to deeply research things, if you have your own ideas, you don't read books about things, you're not going to change the world. And that's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. But it's true. And what you need to do, and this is a hard one for a lot of people, is that you have to learn to enable your passion to carry other people. A lot of people can let their passion carry them. That's easy. It's very easy to let your own passion carry you. But if you really want to change the world, you have to learn to let your passion carry others. Great example, Napoleon. Napoleon was born on the island of Corsica. He joined the French military. But we all know that Napoleon became the emperor of France. He became the leader of this modern empire that came out of the French Revolution. And how did Napoleon do what he did? Well, what did they call Napoleon? What was one of his nicknames? They called him the 100,000 man. Because with his passion, he was a very passionate, fanatical individual. He carried 100,000 people, a huge army. With his passion, he was able to motivate and carry thousands and thousands and thousands of other people. And that's what you have to learn to do. It is one thing to let your passion carry yourself. A lot of people aren't even willing to do that. A lot of people are too socialized, too over-socialized to even be passionate about anything that their boss doesn't give them permission to be passionate about, that their teacher or CNN doesn't give them permission to be passionate about. Not only do you have to learn to let yourself truly be passionate and truly be fanatical about things, but you have to learn to let your passion flow through you and carry others. Not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to do. But if you want to change the world, that's what you have to do. And if you look at great people throughout history who have changed the world, this is something that they do very, very well. I'll point to a few examples while we're here of people who've changed the world. One of them is a person that I greatly, greatly admire, and that is Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi was born to a very impoverished family in Libya. He did not know his birthday because there were no calendars. His family were Bedouin. He was raised by Bedouin. He did not know his birthday. And Colonel Muammar Gaddafi joined the military, was a leader of the Libyan military. When the oil workers went on strike, he was a leader of the patriotic officers of Libya, and they seized control of Libya. And under Gaddafi's leadership, Libya became a socialist country. And it saw its living standards and conditions of life rapidly increase. Universal literacy, universal housing, the highest life expectancy on the African continent, the great man-made river, the world's largest irrigation project. And Libya was carried by the passion of Gaddafi. With his dedication, with his fanaticism, with his obsession with making a strong country out of this North African desert country that he lived in, he transformed the lives of millions and millions of people. And Gaddafi sent support to the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. Gaddafi sent support to Nelson Mandela. He sent support to the Black Panthers in America. The Libyan Revolution had an impact worldwide, but in his own country in particular. It really, really made a difference in people's lives. And it was with his passion, he was able to carry a whole nation. You know, I have recently been highlighting the great Jerry Healy, the leader of the Workers' Revolutionary Party of Britain, one of the Palestine activists who pioneered the Palestine movement. Under his leadership, Vanessa Redgrave, a member of his party, a famous actress, made a documentary film supporting the Palestinians that was shown all over the world. She gave an Academy Award speech condemning Zionist hoodlums. And the more you read about Jerry Healy, I was reading one piece, they said no individual has ever carried an organization the way Jerry Healy carried the Workers' Revolutionary Party. And that at one point, all the British Trotskyists convened a meeting to condemn Jerry Healy. And over 1,000 people gathered in this auditorium to condemn Jerry Healy for what he was revealing about how the Socialist Workers' Party had been colluding with the FBI. And Jerry Healy shocked everyone by showing up with a dozen of his supporters and walking into this hostile territory. And they all gasped when they saw him. And even when he was so outnumbered, he carried a spiritual charge that was massive. And he went there and he demanded the right to speak, to answer those who spoke against him. That's the kind of power that we're talking about. Another great example of somebody who carried people with their passion was Joan of Arc. A woman who said she heard the voice of God, rallied the people of France to defeat the British, became the national saint, the hero of the French people, put on a suit of armor that was made for men, led men into battle. You look at Joan of Arc, this is a truly remarkable person who, again, was certainly willing to be non-conforming, was certainly willing to buck the social norms of the time, was certainly able to carry other people with the spiritual charge and the energy that she had. In Mao's little red book, it says, "He who is unafraid of death by 1,000 cuts dares to unhorse the emperor." And it's people that are fearless, people that are bold, are able to do great things. I think about Stalin. Stalin, this young guy from Georgia who led the Soviet Union to become an industrial superpower, 1/5 of the planet industrialized, and defeated the Nazi invaders, invented space travel, global movement centered around the Soviet Union. You think about what Stalin achieved. It was pretty amazing. No country had ever rapidly industrialized that way. No country had ever withstood what the Soviet Union withstood under Stalin's leadership. And what Stalin did was epically amazing. And there's a reason that after Stalin died, Khrushchev unleashed his tirade against Stalin and worked really hard to try and convince the Soviet people that Stalin had been a self-serving tyrant. And there's a reason that Khrushchev's secret speech was so demoralizing and destroyed and devastated the global communist movement, because it was the spiritual charge, the energy, the passion, the fanaticism of Stalin that had largely carried a mass movement that changed the course of the world, really defined the 20th century. And there's other examples we can point to, right? This image It's an image that has always stuck with me. Just put it on the screen here. Hold on. This is a famous image from the civil rights movement, from Little Rock, Arkansas. An African-American teenage girl defying a mob of racists in order to go to school. Just facing down a huge mob of people that opposed her in order to assert her right to get an education. I look at this image. I think about people that I know that aren't even brave enough to say that CNN could possibly be wrong. People that aren't even brave enough to say that their professor's wrong about Russia. Aren't even brave enough to let themselves challenge or question U.S. foreign policy narratives. I think about this woman who was brave enough to face down a mob of people that hated her, wanted to kill her. Again, history is made by people that are passionate and willing to endure persecution for what they believe. Right? I think about Abraham Lincoln. There's so many stories of Abraham Lincoln. During the U.S. Civil War, people that were demoralized and hopeless would go into Abraham Lincoln's office, and they would come out full of energy, ready to go and defeat the slaveholders, and that Lincoln carried with him a certain energy and power. That's the power you have to learn to cultivate within yourself. If there's anything I want to tell you tonight, it's that if you want to think as heroes think, you have to be willing to get over the phobia of conformity. And you have to be willing to take control of your own mind. You have to say, my thoughts, my mind is the most important thing that I have. And I am going to learn to think in a way that will help me to achieve what I want to achieve. You have to take ownership of yourself. And you have to learn not to let your mind go in crazy places. You know, Xi Jinping, leader of China, he says, the worth of any plan is in its implementation. A lot of people spend their time worthlessly making plans that are not realistic. This is a really, really frustrating thing that I've noticed. A lot of people make plans they have absolutely no intention of carrying out, that are not realistic, that don't match their own abilities. And they come up with plans that are not serious, plans that are not practical. And they daydream about them all day, and they don't actually carry them out. And there are other people who try to carry out plans, but they don't accurately assess what they are capable of doing. And so they fail. And that being successful in life largely means learning what you can do, learning your own abilities. What am I good at? What can I do? Picturing what you want to do and going out and doing it and making mistakes. And then going back to the drawing board and saying, where did I go wrong? And going out and doing it again. And that I have known many people who they are not capable of working around their flaws. Everyone has flaws. Everyone has flaws. And that a lot of people are ashamed of their flaws. They're ashamed of their flaws. And so they refuse to work around them. And I am very disappointed by this. For example, I used to have a roommate who struggled to get up on time, right? He just, his alarm would go off and he would push the snooze button. And every semester, he would schedule an 8 a.m. class. Every semester. And I would say to him, what happened last semester? You didn't go, and you ended up dropping the class. Maybe you should not schedule this. And then this shame would come over him. No, I have to learn to do it. I have to learn to do it. Well, he wasn't learning to do it. And so every semester he would go and make the same mistake again. He would fail again. Right? And I see this, right? That yes, you do need to force yourself to learn to do new things. Yes, you do need to challenge yourself, but if there's certain things you're not good at, there's no reason to keep running into a brick wall. But a lot of people do that. A lot of people just keep running into a brick wall because they're ashamed of running into a brick wall. They say, well, you know what? I need to be able to do something I'm not capable of doing. So rather than planning around their flaw or their shortcoming, they just keep slamming right into it out of shame. Well, admit to yourself, I have very sloppy handwriting. I admit that to myself. So do I try to do things that would require me to have clean handwriting? No, because I know I have sloppy handwriting. But some people are so ashamed of the fact that they have sloppy handwriting that they keep doing things that require them to have clean handwriting, telling themselves, no, I'm going to not have sloppy handwriting. And they just keep having sloppy handwriting. And I've seen this. People who don't work around their own limitations and flaws. It's a weird thing that it's like on the one hand, there are some people that refuse to overcome their flaws, refuse to get better. But there's other people that refuse to work around their flaws. And their flaws are a point of shame, and they are just unable to say, you know what? I am not good at certain things. I am going to figure out how to accomplish what I want to accomplish without doing things I'm not good at. And I've seen that, right? That really, and again, this is that synthesizing that I've said, right? A lot of life is looking at what you have, looking at the landscape and the rules of the game, going to the drawing board in your mind and saying, okay, I want to do blank, going out and trying to do blank, and maybe it doesn't go well, and then going back to the drawing board and trying again. That is so much of what life is. You have to be able to learn the playing field. You have to learn your own abilities. You have to learn what you have. You then have to go to the drawing board in your mind and make a plan. You have to then go try to carry out the plan, and you have to fail. You have to fail. You have to make a mistake, and then you have to be able to go in your mind and say, where did we go wrong? And then you have to go out and do it again. Right? And that process is probably the most important thing. You can be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't have that process, you're going to fail. And you can be the most skilled and talented person in the world, but if you don't have that process, if you can get that process right, if you can assess your own abilities, assess the world around you, go make a plan, go try to carry out the plan, fail, figure out how you failed, and then go back and do the plan again and fail again and go back and maybe be successful, but go back and figure out how you can be even more successful. If you can go out and challenge yourself and say, you know what, I tried to do this, I wasn't successful. I tried to do this, I was successful, but I wasn't as successful as I could be, but I can try this. And then if you constantly learn new moves, you're like a dancer and you learn one move and you get it right, and then you learn another move, and then you get it right, and then you learn another move and you get it right, and you learn another move and you get it right. That is a process that requires success, and it requires being willing to challenge yourself. It requires being willing to make mistakes. It requires being willing to accurately assess the world around you. It requires being able to assess your own abilities. It's a process, and that is the process. That is the process through which the world is changed. It's taking the world, assessing it, and determining in your own mind how you'd like to change it. Going out and trying to change it, and maybe being somewhat successful, maybe failing, and figuring out why you failed and going back. This is the scientific method. This is how human beings have gotten from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel and iPhones by going out and figuring things out. And it requires patience. It requires confidence, right? You have to be able to fail and not just hold your head in shame and be demoralized and say, okay, where did things go wrong? And try again. And you have to be able to fail or not get the results you expected and say, okay, that's frustrating, but I'm going to keep going. And you have to be able to say, okay, I'm getting what I wanted, but I can do better than this, and push yourself to do better. And it is a difficult process, but that is ultimately what it means to be human. That's what this whole quote from Wallace Wattles is about. Not living biologically, not being a football that just goes and whatever, but letting the principle of power within you be active. That means engaging in this process, radiating force, being felt by your environment, being self-active. And it's difficult, and it's not easy, but that's the process of changing the world. And I wanted to just end with one of my most favorite quotations. It's by somebody I don't particularly like. I really don't like the person who said this, but it's a great quotation, if I can just find it, right? It's a great quotation, and it makes sense that he said this. And there's multiple translations of this. This is from Friedrich Nietzsche. This is from his book, Thus Spake Zarathustra. And there are many different translations of this, but it says, one must be filled with chaos to give birth to a dancing star. One must be filled with chaos to give birth to a dancing star. What does that mean? Well, it points to something that Nietzsche was aware of that is true. And I will help you to understand that. Is that the universe is defined by a struggle between chaos and order. There is order in the universe, and there is chaos. And Christianity believes, and most religions believe, that God is order, right? If you read, the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Well, in the Greek, the word for word is logos. And that the beauty of our universe is that our universe is full of chaos, but that chaos is constantly being put back into order. And then that order is being pulled apart with chaos. And then that chaos is being put back into order. And that's one of the beautiful things about the nature of the world that we're in. It's like there is a constant push and pull between chaos and order. Chaos and order. But the bigger the chaos, the more beautiful and powerful and epic the order that comes out of it is. And that's what Nietzsche is observing. If you're filled with chaos, if there is huge chaos within your soul, if you can organize that chaos, you can give birth to a dancing star. Not everything in life is a matter of good and evil. Good and evil exist. Right and wrong exist, but sometimes it's a question of big and small. And if there is big chaos within your soul, that means there is the potential for big beauty. And that's one of the beautiful things about the world. And that too many people have learned to bottle up the chaos within themselves, to breathe in the chaos within themselves and try and contain it, rather than embracing the chaos within themselves and synthesizing it and packing it into a beautiful, beautiful dancing star. Too many people think, I've just got to be small. I've just got to be small. I've got to be small. I've got to be small. I've got to be small. Well, you don't have to be small. You just have to be big in a controlled way. If you're big in a chaotic way, that's very bad. That's insanity. But you can be big in a logos way. And you can give birth to a dancing star. And on that note, folks, names and locations, I will call you all out as I see you. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, Who is with us? Names and locations. Let's go. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Who is with us? Kew Gardens, Checkpoint Charlie, the seasoned noob in China. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Joshua Tree Kinkle. Good to have you with us. We got Peter Sweden. We got Kim in Ontario. We got Gabby in Chicago, Sarah in Oregon, Ryan in Kansas City, Caleb, very distant cousin, Eric in Texas. You're my cousin? That's interesting. I didn't know I had. There you go. Brendan on the left side of the mattress. All right. Henry in Arkansas. Huey in the South. Master Jack in South Africa. It's a strange world he lives in. Rose channeling Joan of Arc. Alex in Brazil. Denver, Colorado. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha. Says Kinkle. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? John in Florida. Good to have you with us, John. Good to have you with us, John. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Anybody else? Names and locations. I'm having a great time with all of you tonight. I really, really am. Really am. I noticed that somebody sent a Rumble rant, Leo Messi, but no one has sent any Buy Me a Coffees yet. And that makes it very hard for me to answer questions. So I will start answering questions, but there are 3 ways to send questions for the second half of the show. And we are about an hour in. It's 10:06 Eastern time. So send questions for the second half of the show. Buy me a coffee. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Do want to remind you all about our big event coming up in New Jersey. It's going to be very epic, going to be awesome. If you're in the New Jersey area or if you're on the East Coast or whatnot, come and sign up, be there. There'll be a nice dinner buffet and music and all kinds of stuff. It's going to be a great day. So please join us at our really great event. It's going to be pretty awesome. Please be there for that event. And while I'm waiting for you all to send questions, I am going to put on a piece of music that kind of fits with everything I was just talking about. I guess Gabby said she played this piece of music in orchestra when she was in school. It is one of my favorite pieces of music. It's Jupiter from the Planets. And I guess the version of it that I will play is a version of like, I guess there was a flash mob. Like a flash mob performed this. They set up the orchestra in a public place and performed it. So I am going to put that on. I'm going to put on Jupiter from the Planets, the flash mob performance of it. And then hopefully you all will have sent some good questions. And then I will answer some questions. So yeah, questions can be sent. Best way to do it is Buy Me a Coffee, Caleb Maupin. That is the best way to send questions. But there are other ways. to send questions as well. So yeah, we'll put that piece on. I'm just waiting for it. Yeah, I saw. It just came in. And there's one Rumble rant as well. So we're going to be answering questions here, but please send questions. Get me talking in the second half of the show. That's what we're here to do. Right? It's been a good week for me, I must say. It's been a great week for me and for CPI. 6 people joined CPI this week. That's really significant. In addition to that, we have been doing great outreach at the food banks, right? To raise, to reach out to the people that are struggling because this awful government shutdown. I appeared on Due Dissidence podcast today, and I pre-taped an interview with Academic Agent. We just had an amazing CPI meeting this afternoon, like 20 people from around the country engaging in different activities. And we're making big plans, and yeah, great things are happening. So yeah, buy me a coffee if you can. And then, yeah, I'll put this. All right. Yeah, it's making me jump through a lot of hoops to get the music. That's okay. But yeah, we'll put the music on. But yeah, you can send questions via Buy Me a Coffee. It's the best way to send questions. You can also do Rumble rants. You can also Cash App me. But Buy Me the Coffee is the best way to send your questions. Right? So yeah, I know they had a great meeting of the Midwestern CPI today. And then they had a great reading group in Minneapolis. I was just in Minneapolis with Gary and Tom and Penny. We discussed the Khrushchevism book. They're doing a great reading group out there. And yeah, I mean, we're getting her done. We're getting good stuff done, and I'm really happy with all that our organization is doing. So yeah, send me some more questions. Here's Jupiter from the planets. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great piece of music. All right. So, one question came. A couple questions have come via Buy Me a Coffee. All right. So we'll start with Steve. Steve says, John Brown, the great American hero, Israel needs a John Brown, says Laith Maruth on Jamarl's show. Your thoughts? Well, I do agree that John Brown was a great American, the greatest American. Very proud of John Brown. We have a big, image of John Brown at many of our events. Great martyr for the abolitionist cause, the struggle to defeat slavery. John Brown was a great, great hero in American history. The first American ever executed for treason. A fanatical abolitionist who wanted to defeat slavery. We look to John Brown in great, great awe and reverence as a great example of the American revolutionary tradition of anti-racist solidarity, etc. John Brown, you want to read a book about him, I recommend W.E.B. Du Bois wrote a very, very good book on the life of John Brown. It's very good. I would recommend that book. Like a biography that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote. It's very good. As far as Israel needing a John Brown, there's a little bit of a problem with that, which is that, right, John Brown lived in America, but he did not live in the South. And he was not a slave owner himself. Living in Israel at this point is kind of a political statement. There are many Jewish people around the world who don't agree with Israel and don't live there. There are many Jewish people around the world who do agree with Israel and also don't live there. But living in Israel is itself kind of a political statement. So the reason that you're not going to see a John Brown among the Israelis is because they're living there because they support the project. Now, there are a lot of Israelis that object to Netanyahu and think that what he's doing is mismanaging it. It just wouldn't make sense, right? That I don't know who this individual who said it is. I see people in the chat saying stuff, and just calm down. I don't know who the individual is, so I'm just reacting to what I received here, and I just don't. It's not the same thing, right? That John Brown was an American who was opposed to slavery, right? But to live in Israel is a political statement, right? All of America was not practicing slavery during the life of John Brown. John Brown lived in Kansas for a while, lived in Ohio, etc. But he was not like a slave owner in the South. And if one was a slave owner in the South, one would not become John Brown. Living in Israel is a political statement. So the idea that some Israeli is just going to, take up arms on the side of the Palestinians. No, if they were opposed to what Israel was doing, they wouldn't be living there. I don't know. It's a little bit of a different situation. I kind of understand the idea that they're asking for solidarity with the Palestinians that are being brutally oppressed. They're asking for somebody from the privileged group, which is the Israelis, to come over to their side. I mean, there are a lot of Jews that support the Palestinians. There's Neturei Karta. There's Jewish Voices for Peace. There are plenty of Jews who support the Palestinians. But the idea that you're going to have some Israeli citizen who's living there and then is going to go over to their side or something, that doesn't exactly line up. The idea is good, though. The idea of solidarity with the oppressed, right? That's the idea, is that people that are in the privileged position should side with the downtrodden. And I don't disagree with that. So I don't find the statement to be completely wrong, but it just doesn't match the situation exactly. I hope that is helpful, Steve. I'll have to go. I love Jamarl, and Jamarl has great guests on his show. I don't know this Laith person, but I can go listen to the whole interview and understand the context of what Laith was saying. And I can better understand what he was getting at. But yeah, John Brown was a great abolitionist, a great Christian, a great martyr for the oppressed, gave his life in the struggle to defeat slavery. So there we go. Now, Kim, someone named Kim, has bought 3 coffees, and she says, what is your honest opinion of the Trotskyist scene today and or in the past? That's an interesting question. Well, Kim, I am known to be a harsh critic of Trotskyism. I think that Trotskyism represents the wing of leftism that refused to become anti-imperialist. And I'm very, very critical of Trotskyism in general. But I've written on it extensively. I wrote the book Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. It's gotten widely reviewed, and I'm doing the podcast round about this book about how Trotskyism kind of among the New York intellectuals deteriorated into neoconservatism. Generally, just so you know, there are three categories of Trotskyism. Generally, the first is what you call neo-Trotskyists, or third camp Trotskyists. People that follow Tony Cliff, people that follow Max Shachtman. And the third camp Trotskyites tend to be based in academia. And they believe that the Soviet Union was state capitalist, that it was not a workers' state. And that's a position Trotsky vehemently argued against. In 1939, Trotsky and his followers had a big fight. And the third camp Trotskyists, who followed Max Shachtman and Tony Cliff and Martin Aburn and all of that, they took the position the Soviet Union was not a workers' state. It was a capitalist society, or it was a bureaucrat collectivist society. And for a long time in the United States, the biggest like Marxist group that you would see on all the college campuses was called the ISO, the International Socialist Organization. And they were a third camp Trotskyist group. They were followers of Max Shachtman. Max Shachtman had what was called the Independent Socialist League. And on college campuses, they had the Independent Socialist Clubs. And at UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley, the Independent Socialist Club of Shachtmanites, they were followers of Max Shachtman. When Shachtman denounced Lenin, they cut ties with Shachtman and aligned themselves with Tony Cliff. And what was called the IS, or the International Socialists, the International Socialist Tendency. In Britain, it's called the SWP, the British SWP. These are the third camp Trotskyites, and they are the most vulgar. They are CIA agents for the most part. I mean, the ISO, I remember during the Arab Spring, I wish I could find this guy and punch him. I'm just kidding. I don't advocate violence, but I remember during the Arab Spring, I was part of the United National Anti-War Committee, and the ISO, the International Socialist Organization, was part of the United National Anti-War Committee. And they got up and they talked about the Egyptian Revolution is so amazing because the Russian Empire, by that they meant the Soviet Union, is gone. And, if the Egyptian Revolution had happened during the Cold War, it would have just ended up like Cuba. It would have just ended up like Libya under Gaddafi. It would have just gone to shit. But now, because the Soviet Union's not there, the Egyptian Revolution is free to develop into something beautiful. I want to grab them and say, look what you said. So how's that going, right? Now there's no Soviet Union. How did the Egyptian Revolution turn out, you fucking idiot, right? Too bad good thing they didn't have Cuba. Good thing they didn't have, the highest life expectancy in Africa. These people, they cheered for the Libyan Revolution, and they said, oh, well, we oppose the bombing, but they didn't protest the bombing. And they cheered for the people who brought down Gaddafi, and they spoon-fed CIA propaganda. Whenever the USA is trying to overthrow the Iranian government, they're out there supporting it. They were claiming that the Syrian, civil war was actually a workers' revolution. Oh, there's this workers' socialist revolution going on in Syria. Wherever the imperialists are trying to overthrow a country, they act as the socialist voice for it. They are despicable. 1989, this is the most blatant example. The Tiananmen Square protests in China. They actually admitted in one of their articles that the students that were trying to overthrow the Chinese government were trying to bring back capitalism. We're working for U.S. imperialism. But they said even that is superior, is better than Chinese Stalinism. They were basically just admitting they're on the side of U.S. imperialism. They claim, oh, well, we're against military interventions or whatever. They're always on the side. Sherry Wolf and Ahmed Shawki and those people, they are CIA agents in the name of socialism, and I cannot stand them, right? And that, and the whole reason I got interested in socialism, communism, all of that is because I learned at a young age that what we've been spoon-fed about the Soviet Union is a lie, right? Is that, we've been told it just never worked anywhere. That's bullshit, right? Economically, the Soviet Union had great achievements. And this lie, the neoliberal free market lie that, socialism just never accomplished anything. We've all just been poor and starving. That's just not true. And Trotskyites, they go along with that, right? And they just say, well, that just wasn't real socialism. I remember when I first encountered an ISO member, an ISO Trotskyite, I opened their newspaper, socialist newspaper, paid $1, got it, opened it up, and they had our 5 main points. Point number 1, China, Cuba, these countries have nothing to do with socialism. Unbelievable. Americans are spoon-fed all these just dirty, rotten lies about the Soviet Union, about socialism, that capitalism is the only way. Look, everywhere that's ever had socialism, people have been starving and miserable. And the first thing they do in their newspaper is say that's all true. And we echo that. And but we're going to do it different. They are the caricature of, the right wing. Well, that's just not real socialism. They are an absolute disgrace. The ISO dissolved in 2019. They merged into DSA. They're now the International Socialist Tendency of DSA. And that's third camp Trotskyism. And that's the people who became neocons, Max Shachtman and Michael Harrington and, the Irving Kristol and all of them, the neocon roots of Trotskyism, the Trotskyist roots of neoconservatism. It's the third camp Trots who broke with Trotsky over the Russian question. Now, that's one faction. Now you have, in addition to that, you have what's called mainline Trotskyism. That's socialist alternative. Used to be the USSWP. They're kind of that. They're, the USSWP has kind of morphed into its own thing now. But they were, for a long time, they defined, mainline Trotskyism. The Fourth International that Trotsky created in 1938 that continued on until the 1960s and 70s as just kind of the global Trotskyist movement. Tariq Ali, I'm trying to remember who else, there's a lot of like writers and Ernst Mandel, the French Trotskyist writer. And that was what you call mainline Trotskyism. And mainline Trotskyism, they were against the Soviet Union, but they liked Cuba. They were sympathetic to Cuba, and they were sympathetic to the Vietnamese National Liberation Front, and they were playing a game. The idea was to try and separate, there was a huge amount of enthusiasm for third world anti-colonial movements. And the main country backing them all was the Soviet Union. And the third camp, or the mainline Trotskyists, were kind of useful in trying to separate them. They would say, well, you can like Cuba, but don't like the Soviet Union. Well, Cuba wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Soviet Union buying their sugar, at fixed rates and subsidizing them. Cuba would never have accomplished what it accomplished. But the mainline Trotskyists, they said Fidel Castro is an unconscious Trotskyist. They denounced the Soviet Union and they supported anti-Soviet, color revolutions in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and places like that. And they also, they supported the Mujahideen of Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden, and all of that. And they tried to equate Cuba and the Vietnamese liberation struggle with the Hungarian counter-revolution, with Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. It was a game. They were trying to separate anti-colonial sentiments in the third world from the Soviet Union. Right. And that was the main psyop that Ernest Mandel and Tariq Ali and people like that played. Right. And that's that's mainline Trotskyism. And mainline Trotskyists, it's interesting, tend to, when it comes to Israel and Palestine, they didn't play that good of a role. Like the U.S. Socialist Workers Party is now pro-Israel. They're Zionists at this point. They support Israel. And they take the pro-Israeli positions, but like Socialist Alternative, they take this neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis position. The working class of both sides needs to unite and overthrow the capitalists. They're against the Arabs and they're against the Israelis, right? And it's a class question, and that if you support the Palestinians, that's nationalism. Right. And they're not very good on Israel and Palestine in a lot of cases. And the USSWP is the most blatant, and then they're pro-Israel. But like Socialist Alternative groups like that take weird positions where it's like, well, we're against the Palestinians because they're not communists, and the Israeli workers' unions and the Palestinian workers' unions need to merge and oppose both sides and unite or something. They take weird positions like that kind of obscure the Palestinian struggle. And yeah, that's mainline Trotskyism, right? The mainline Trotskyism was a big deal during the late Cold War in the 70s and 80s, like the militant tendency within the British Labour Party. It was like a Trotskyite faction that joined the Labour Party and controlled, I think, was it Liverpool or Birmingham or like some British industrial city. They controlled the city council. They infiltrated the Labour Party. Officially, the Labour Party bans Trotskyists from being members, and like Jeremy Corbyn was like secretly aligned with some Trotskyist faction in the Labour Party. And it's a big deal, especially in Britain. Right? In Britain, you have a lot of Trotskyists that are in the Labour Party, even though the British Labour Party bans them and all of that, right? So that's mainline Trotskyism. Now, there's a third category of Trotskyists, and they're called Orthodox Trotskyists. And Orthodox Trotskyists, for the most part, are lunatics. I mean, they're just nuts. They think World War II is still going on, for example. A lot of Orthodox Trotskyists maintain that World War II never ended. Why? Well, Trotsky said that World War II could only end with a workers' revolution, so clearly it's still happening, right? And you'll see like Orthodox Trotskyists in New York City, if there was ever a protest about the Middle East, they would show up and they'd have signs, "For a socialist federation of the Near East." And first of all, like what does that have to do with anything going on in the world right now? That's not victory to Palestine. That's not no money for Israel. For a socialist federation of the Near East. And also Near East. Who says Near East anymore? Near to what? Right? It's like, but that's what Trotsky said in his old pamphlets, Near East instead of Middle East. Now we say Middle East. We don't say Near East. And so they're like LARPing, for a socialist federation of the Near East. Right. Some of these Orthodox Trotskyists want to legalize pedophilia because, age of consent is somehow authoritarian. I mean, that's pretty nuts. Some of them believe in UFOs and believe that like UFOs prove that communism exists on other planets. And they're fringe. And Orthodox Trotskyists, their newspapers tend to focus only on other Trotskyist groups. Like there's one guy in New York City, and he was one of these guys, and like he had a newspaper. He was the only guy in his group. He was the only one. And I would see him at protests, and he'd be handing out his newsletter. And I said to him, "Hey, every article in your newsletter is about some other little tiny Trotskyist group, right? Have you thought about maybe like writing articles about why capitalism is bad?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, Caleb, the road to the masses is through the vanguard. And until the vanguard has the correct line, we cannot approach the masses." And it's like every article in their paper is about another little Trotskyist group being wrong. And they go to each other's events and they like go over each other's manifestos line by line to prove that the other group is wrong. And I don't know, it's a world of kind of bizarre sectarian politics. And it's very esoteric, and it used to be a lot bigger. Now it's quite small. But when I first got involved politically during the Iraq War days, the internet there was no social media. There was internet, but it was very new. And you'd go to an Iraq War protest, there'd be a million of these little, Orthodox Trotskyist groups. And they would be there, and they all had newspapers, the League for the Revolutionary Party, the International Bolshevik Tendency, the Internationalist Group, the League for the Revolutionary Party, the Spartacist League, and the Trotskyite platform, the Trotskyist platform, and I don't know. I mean, there's so many of them, and they all hated each other, and they were all fighting with each other. And, that scene has really decreased. Now the people who used to do that, there's a certain type of kind of semi-autistic male who would join one of those groups. And now that guy just edits Wikipedia. He just argues with people on Facebook all day and edits Wikipedia. He doesn't have to join a group to get that kind of esoteric politics. What I will say, though, is that some of the Orthodox Trotskyists, because they're so hardline and dogmatic, they will actually, like, for example, I remember one of these groups, the Spartacist League, supported Russia in Crimea. And they took the position, they said Crimea is Russia. Russia is opposing U.S. imperialism. They supported Crimea joining with Russia. And, in their paper, if you read it, they said, look, They took a fair position. Jerry Healy was an Orthodox Trotskyist, and he was the only Orthodox Trotskyist who really mattered, right? He built the Workers' Revolutionary Party in Britain, and they actually, took really good positions on Palestine, and they aligned with Gaddafi. And that they were a massive group from an Orthodox Trotskyist perspective that ended up supporting Gaddafi, supporting the Palestinians, and doing amazing things. And they were viciously targeted by American intelligence. And that's why I wrote In Defense of Jerry Healy. And in this pamphlet, like, I start out with, an explanation of the different kinds of Trotskyisms. Group number 1, Neo-Trotskyism. Group number 2, mainline Trotskyism. Group number 3, Orthodox Trotskyism. It's all in here. I consider Jerry Healy probably the best thing that ever came out of Trotskyism. Look, there are exceptions. There are people in the name of Trotskyism that do good things. And there are like spin-offs too. Like, I was in the Workers' World Party for many years, and the Workers' World Party was a spin-off of Trotskyism. They had started out as a faction of the Socialist Workers' Party. They interpreted Trotskyism in this way that was very contrary. And it got to the point they weren't really Trotskyists when I was in it. We never discussed or read Trotsky. Trotsky was just something that kind of got referenced vaguely. But, basically the way it was explained to me when I was in the group, Deirdre Griswold said, to be a real Trotskyist, to really do what Trotsky wanted, don't read Trotsky, don't ever quote Trotsky, and align yourself with a bunch of Stalin supporters. They had this, like, Sam Marcy had developed his own kind of thing. That was like kind of a weird spin-off interpretation of Trotskyism. You could say the same thing about Healy too, though Healy quoted Trotsky a lot and all of that, but he ended up supporting Gaddafi and all of that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Trotskyism. Trotskyism is Trotsky's theory of permanent revolution is a rejection of Leninism. Lenin said the Western system, the imperialist Western financial system, is the main threat. Trotsky never accepted that. Trotsky wanted to be part of European social democracy. He just wanted to be the radical faction of it. And that's what Trotskyism seeks to do. They want to be in the same room as AOC and in the same room as Bernie. They just want to be the revolutionaries that are in the same room, right? In Britain, they try to join the Labour Party, and then a room with Tony Blair and, and all the awful bomb Iraq laborites. They're in the back of the room going, ooh, 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 call on me, pass my resolution. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's what they're trying to do. Right. And it's the same in the United States. Right. AOC is the enemy. She supports U.S. imperialism. She's anti-working class, but she does it in the name of, I want people to have health care as long as they're pro-trans, and Trots generally, they want to be in the same room as AOC. They just want to be in the back of the room shouting, ooh, 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 call on me, pass my resolution. Well, we don't, right? If you read what Lenin wrote in his very important pamphlet, Imperialism and the Split in Socialism, Lenin says we don't want to be, right? We don't want to be in the same room as the social democrats and the social imperialists, right? Instead, we want to go lower and deeper to the real masses, right? Neither we nor anyone else can calculate precisely what portion of the proletariat is following and will follow the social chauvinists and opportunists. This will only be revealed by the struggle, and it will definitely be decided only by the socialist revolution. But we know for certain that the defenders of the fatherland and imperialist war represent only a minority. It is therefore our duty, if we wish to remain socialist, to go down lower and deeper to the real masses. And by exposing the opportunists and social chauvinists who are betraying and selling out the interests of the masses and defending the temporary privileges of a minority of workers, the vehicles of bourgeois ideas and influences, they are really allies and agents of the bourgeoisie. We teach the masses to appreciate their true political interests, and we use war to do it. That's the point. We are not trying to be part of AOC's club and just be the part that's not as pro-imperialist. We want to expose AOC, and we want to go lower and deeper to the real masses who hate AOC, and we want to organize them against AOC, right? And against Bernie Sanders. Right? We have no loyalty to Bernie Sanders, no loyalty to the left, no loyalty to the anti-Trump movement, no loyalty to any of that. We want to go down lower and deeper to the real masses, and we align with the forces around the world that are struggling against imperialism, not for workers to get a bigger share of the imperialist profits, not to make imperialism work better, but to dismantle imperialism and to align the United States with the rising new economy around the world, right? Trotskyism is against the new economy rising around the world. It's Stalinism, it's evil authoritarianism, it's just as bad or if not worse than the Western system, right? And they fantasize, where has there ever been a Trotskyist revolution? I asked a Trot once, I said, has there ever been a real workers' revolution anywhere? And they said, yes, in Russia in 1917. And I said, I looked at my watch. I said, it's been a while, hasn't it? There's not been a revolution that Trotsky can support anywhere in the world except for the Russian Revolution of 1917. History just stopped in 1917, I guess, right? Nothing good ever happened. The only revolutions they support are CIA revolutions, right? Whenever there's a CIA-led protest against some regime funded by US-backed NGOs, woo, they love it. But do they support North Korea, Cuba, China? No. They can't do that. They can't possibly be against US imperialism. They can't possibly not be on the same team as the imperialists or the corrupt labor union bosses. I really, there's a new economy that came into the world as a result of the Russian Revolution, as a result of the anti-colonial struggles of the 20th century. That's the future. And Trotskyism is defined by opposing that. And so that's why I am anti-Trotsky, right? And that Leninism was about breaking with social democracy and building a movement against the imperialists. And Lenin gave support to the Emir of Afghanistan. Lenin gave support to the Egyptian merchants that were struggling against the British Empire. And Trotskyism is saying, no, we're part of the Western European socialist movement. And no, not a big fan. Not a big fan. All right. So there we go. Gabby has sent in a question. Gabby, what is your question? Gabby says, why do nonprofits have to exist just to feed the poor? If our government truly worked for the people, we wouldn't need charities to survive. These nonprofits exist because capitalism creates poverty, then uses charities and churches to cover up the damage. And the wealthy benefit from this. They get tax write-offs for donations and look generous while the system makes them rich and keeps people struggling. Charity ends up protecting capitalism more than it ends poverty. You're not wrong. I mean, a lot of people have pointed out a lot of these charities are like, they're an end to themselves, right? It's a business, right? There's a staff of people that are getting paid to administer that charity that are like, paying their own salaries, and that there's people that are on the board of these charities that are getting six-figure salaries. And so it's like, you donate to the charity, it's like a large percentage of your donation is not actually going to help the people. It's going to pay the salary of the CEO and the board of the nonprofit that is going around raising the money. That's a fair criticism. I tend to think that nonprofits and charities, I don't share completely that negative view, and that there are some of them that actually do very, very important work. I would say more than just kind of what you're describing, Gabby, I would say a lot of these charities play a negative political role, right? A lot of them play, for example, right? There's a lot of these nonprofits in New York City that are woke, right? And it's like, young college kid who's interested in socialism and communism or whatever gets hired by one of these nonprofits, and in order to keep their job, they have to be pro-imperialist, right? And this is actually, it's funny because this is what Lenin talked about at the time. This is how World War I happened, right? Is that a position on the board of respectable newspapers, hired to work at the universities, and whether it's the university jobs or the nonprofit jobs or the labor union bureaucracy jobs, a lot of people who should know better and should be anti-imperialist are not, because they want to be a professional activist. And in order to be a professional activist, they have to work someplace that's aligned with the Democrat Party. There's a lot of NGOs in New York City that have after-school programs for LGBT youth, or have after-school programs that focus on anti-racist training for young people of color and all of this. And young people work there, young socialists and radicals work there, and to work there, they have to be Democrats. And look, I was in the Workers' World Party, and they set up an NGO in North Carolina, and it was disgusting. And I mean, the NGO politics, those people, they were, they brought in the money so they could do whatever they wanted. They were not communists. I mean, they were not. Right. And, the people that the North Carolina crowd that like took over the Workers' World Party, they were all getting paid to work at some stupid nonprofit. And though they couldn't ever talk about communism, no, we don't want to, we got to get our foundation money. And so it was just this woke, they would like video themselves at a rally and they would give a speech and be like, racism is bad. And then they would send it out and it would be like, whoa, that was so epic. And I'd be like, how did that change anything in the conversation? Well, no. Are you saying that young black youth speaking up and saying racism is bad is not revolutionary? Yes, I'm saying that. Yes, that's a very trendy thing these days, and it was just like this like watered down, like pro-transgender, anti-racist politics that doesn't say anything about the struggle against imperialism around the world, never mentions that, never talks about economics and class struggle. It's all just about, empowering marginal communities and whatever the latest NGO liberal academic bullshit buzzwords are, right? Yeah, there's a lot of money if you'll talk that way, right? If you'll talk about marginal communities and people of color and youth and LGBT and oppression, if you'll talk this stupid NGO whatever, right? And you can get grant money and you can do an after school program and you can take pictures of yourself patting little kids on the head like Queen Elizabeth. And you can, put on a big fundraiser gala and get big checks from George Soros. But the second, if you do that and then you start saying pro-Palestine stuff, or you start saying, that Gaddafi was right in Libya, you're done, right? Or you start saying that Russia, God forbid Russia. Oh, you can't say that. That's like Trump. And that's how they control a lot of left people. And that's why the left is really deteriorated, is they've all been hired, right? They've all been hired by this. So yeah, I mean, the nonprofit world plays a very, very negative role. It's basically, a way that you become a staffer for the Democratic Party. And I've had people who watch these streams email me and they'd be like, Caleb, I got interested in communism in college and I ended up working at one of these labor unions and it's hell. I mean, everyone's always telling on everybody else at work and you have to be a Democrat to work here. And people are so pro-imperialist and, anyone who questions anything is spreading right-wing conspiracy theories. This is how they control people who generally do want to do good, right? And do want to fight for working families with the labor unions or do want to do that. That's how they control them, is they pay them to do it. And in order to get paid to do it, you have to become a woke. You have to become a woke and you have to, be part of this bullshit. And that's why we have to go down lower and deeper to the real masses. Anything that's got left stamped on it right now in America is corrupt, right? Left has been completely manufactured, right? There are people, I mean, I am critical of Trump. I don't support Trump bombing Iran. I don't support Trump, threatening Venezuela. We're not sitting here shilling for Trump, but anyone who's part of the Stop Trump hysteria, they're far gone. They're lost. I'll tell you, one of the worst things I ever heard about, this will just end it. The West Virginia teachers strike. Do you remember the West Virginia teachers strike? West Virginia teachers strike, right? Was not sanctioned by the union. 2018, teachers all over West Virginia, they were going to force the teachers to take a horrific contract where they got rated on their daily healthcare habits and had to wear a band that monitored their exercise. And it was awful. And the teachers across West Virginia did a wildcat strike in 2018. It was a great thing. Most of those teachers who did it were Republicans, right? Because it's West Virginia, it's a red state, and it's Appalachia, and they're white, and they're white teachers who just didn't want this awful contract. It was a great heroic labor uprising in 2018 of these West Virginia teachers who rose up and they forced the state of West Virginia to back down and give them a fair contract. It was a great thing. What happened? Right? Little known story. The Workers' World Party, a Marxist-Leninist communist party, supposedly, right? I was out of it at the time, thank God. I'd been out of it for 3 years at the time. And I heard from the Detroit members of the party what happened, which is that, the party in West Virginia was run by 5 or 6 of these woke people who worked at labor unions or worked at liberal NGOs in Morgantown or whatever. And when the teachers went on strike, they wrote a manifesto on their website and said all these teachers are racist and they should pay reparations instead of going on strike. And then it ended with one settler, one bullet. That's what happened. Because, God forbid that, low income, low paid teachers in West Virginia want better treatment on the job. Right. But that's how wokeism trains you to think. Right. They said that the Medicare for all marches were Nazi. Right. You remember that? That's what the woke people said. The Medicare for all marches were white supremacist. And, because, some guy was going to march in Indiana at one of the rallies. Therefore, it was all a big Nazi thing. Jimmy Dore was a white supremacist for saying that AOC should force the vote. Wokeism is anti-working class. And the nonprofit apparatus recruits people that should be populists and anti-imperialists, and it recruits them into this satanic Democratic Party woke bullshit. And I joined the Workers' World Party in 2007, and I watched them deteriorate into that bullshit. And the same thing happened to the Communist Party, and the same thing happened to all the communist groups, is that the labor union bureaucracy and this academic bullshit seeped into the communist groups, and they all turned into shit, right? And now there is no anti-imperialism in America, right? The Uhuru movement got raided by the FBI, and none of these people did anything about it. Well, the internet says that they're racist and they're tied to Russia, and Russia, Trump, bad. And a black communist group got their homes raided by the FBI, and none of these motherfuckers would do anything about it because they're so fucking loyal to the Democratic Party. We at Center for Political Innovation, we were out in front of the courthouse in Tampa. Tucker Carlson supported them. Glenn Beck even supported them. But these woke people are so, they've got Trump derangement syndrome, and they're so scared of losing their non-profit paycheck from George Soros. They couldn't stand with a group of black communist activists against the fucking FBI, right? Anything left in America is completely corrupted. And to the previous question, Trotskyism wants to be part of that bullshit. And socialist alternative and Shama Sawant and all them, they all want to be part of that bullshit. They're convinced they can somehow make that bullshit into something good. No, you can't. Lower and deeper to the real masses. Lower and deeper to the real masses. That's where we belong. And that's my thoughts on the nonprofit industrial complex, Trotskyism, all of that. All right. Hope that was a helpful answer to your question, Gabby. It wasn't exactly what you were getting at, but you asked me. I am disgusted by the liberal nonprofit industrial complex of, people that get paid to write articles on gender theory and put on workshops about the oppression of Puerto Rican transgender people and why we should hate Russia. I hate all that bullshit. It's all a bunch of CIA. It has nothing to do with supporting Gaddafi. I couldn't stand it. Libya, the most prosperous country in the African continent, was destroyed in 2011. And barely anybody did anything about it. But the day that Trump won the election in 2016, all these fucking people were out there. Oh, we've got to fight Trump. All of that. Obama took the most prosperous country on the African continent and bombed it to shreds, and you didn't do anything about it. But Trump just got elected. He didn't even do anything yet. He just got elected, but he says racist thing. Oh, got to get out there and support the Democrats against Trump. Fuck these people. Fuck these people. Fuck them. Seriously, they are worthless. They are worthless. Lenin called the Second International a stinking corpse. These people are a stinking corpse if there ever was one, right? They couldn't raise a finger to defend a socialist country in Africa. But Donald Trump, the second he got elected, they're in the streets and they're so proud of themselves. Oh, they're so heroic. Oh, they're so heroic. These are the kind of people, and what the other thing about it, right? They all love the Black Panthers. Oh, they love the Black Panthers. You know why? Because the Black Panthers are dead. Because the Black Panthers existed in the 70s and 80s. If these people had been around at the time of the Black Panthers, supporting the Black Panthers would have meant going against the FBI and going against the mainstream media, and they wouldn't do it. they wouldn't have done it, right? They all love the Black Panthers now, but they don't stand with Uhuru, who the FBI is going after now. And the Black Panthers all supported North Korea. And the Black Panthers supported Mao in China. And, I mean, give me a break, right? Anyway, I could rant against the left all night long, and that's not the best thing for me to do with my time. But thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. All right. But anyway, Patricia Kinky says, just curious. Have you ever hung out for a while with the Stele of Hammurabi at the Louvre? At the Louvre, it's pretty intense. I don't know what that is, so I'm going to Google that. The Stele of Hammurabi at the Louvre. I know the Louvre is a museum in France, very famous art museum. What is the Stele of Hammurabi? I don't know what it is, but we're going to find out, right? The original stele, or stele, which dates back 3,800 years, stands in the Louvre in Paris, and it was found in 1901. It's the oldest written code of laws. Oh, the Code of Hammurabi. Oh, well, that's pretty cool. Let's put an image of it on the screen. The Stele of Hammurabi. All right, this is the code of law of ancient Mesopotamia. Very cool. Very cool. The Code of Hammurabi, the Stele of Hammurabi. All right, very good. We'll put that on the screen. Yeah, I know about the Code of Hammurabi was the first written law, right? And so this is the Stele of Hammurabi is the version of that. Very, very cool. We will put that on the screen. Hold on. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Here it is. Look at that. That's great. It's a precursor to the Ten Commandments. Very, very cool. I think that's really cool. I think that's very neat. That's very, very neat. I am all about ancient history. You talk about, I talk about the Bull of Heaven and the Epic of Gilgamesh, and lots of shadows of the tablets of Moses. That's very cool. That is very cool. I'm all about classical history. I often will reference the Bull of Heaven and the Epic of Gilgamesh in my writings. I think that's very cool. Very, very cool. Very, very cool indeed. All right, next question. Richard, aka Unanimous, asks, some conservatives compare the Gaza genocide to the execution of Tsarist insurgents in the Russian Civil War. Like, point and laugh, LOL. I blame the death of Arab socialism and the PSL. Do you see any changes coming in the Middle East with the Sultans kissing the wall in recent years? Okay, so Richard, I mean, this is kind of your thing, which is okay. You have your beat. You kind of follow what the right-wing people are saying and how confused it is, right? So this is the thing that Candace Owens and all of them have been saying, which is that, they buy into the idea that communism is a Jewish conspiracy. And so they argue that the atrocities committed by communists during the Russian Civil War are similar to what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, right? That's Candace Owens has said similar things and others. And that's a trope in right-wing media right now. And it's unfortunate and it's wrong, right? And that, I think the way Candace Owens has said it before is she says, there was a genocide of Christians in the Soviet Union. Well, there was heavy persecution of Christians during the Russian Civil War, no question about it. There was destruction of churches and stuff, but they didn't exterminate Christians for being Christian. There was not a genocide. There was simply, political repression. There was a war, the Russian Civil War, and the country was barricaded at the time, and millions of people died, and the British sent their army to Azerbaijan to seize the oil fields, and there was two sides in the Russian Civil War, and the White Army would go slaughter Jewish villages. And I mean, the Russian Civil War was an awful mess, and a lot of people died on both sides, and there were horrendous atrocities on both sides. And the Bolsheviks did persecute, and did try to suppress the Russian Orthodox Church, which they saw as aligned with the Tsar. But it's not the extermination of people for being Christian. That's not what happened. Okay. And I've heard Candace Owens say this, I've heard others say this, and that there is this, again, it's part of the right-wing universe, is that the establishment and communism are the same thing. And I don't know how they believe that. It kind of makes sense if you think woke is communism, because woke is the establishment, no question about it, but woke is not communism. But I've had this argument even with some people that I know that I respect and I'm close to in other ways. China and Bernie Sanders are not the same. Mamdani in North Korea are not the same. And that's blatantly obvious if you look at it. And, but there are people that just refuse to see that because they are trying to be a good Republican, right? We're calling the woke people communists and we hate the communist countries. And it's just like, that just doesn't match reality. Okay. Like, some things are true and some things are not. Woke people are woke people and communists are communists, and woke people may quote Marx here and there and they may criticize capitalism. But they all hate China. They all hate North Korea. George Soros funds anti-government protests in China and in North Korea. Like, it's not the same thing. But, it's this brain block and so that's part of that. I put that in that same category. The Abraham Accords were what Trump was proposing. Is Trump's big thing where he got some Muslim governments, I think Tunisia and the United Arab Emirates, to recognize Israel. And the basis of that was opposition to Iran. I don't see that happening again anytime soon because now anyone who's opposing Israel right now has to kind of admit that Iran and the Houthis and their allies are fighting them. The basis of the Abraham Accords was like, okay, the Saudi-aligned countries are against Iran, so maybe Israel isn't the main threat. That was the idea. And I don't see that Abraham Accords like stuff happening anytime soon because in order for that to happen, you'd have to have Iran as the main threat. And at this point, even Saudi Arabia has stopped pretty much fighting the Houthis because the Houthis are fighting Israel, and the whole Muslim world is opposed to Israel right now. So yeah, the Abraham Accords thing and the like kind of, subtle reconciliation with Israel by some Arab states, that's not going to happen. Now you blame the death of Arab socialism in the PSL. Well, I blame the PSL for sure, right? The PSL, they put on a conference. Noah and I went to it and we distributed the Houthi books and we got removed from it, and I was blown away because it was PSL. They were all working at the conference for free, but the conference was basically just a place to give a stage to a bunch of Arab Democrats. I was blown away. I used to think of, PSL as kind of a rival of the Jewish Voices for Peace and all that. But now it's gotten to the point that PSL, basically, they just want to be stage managers for them. PSL basically wants to wokeify the pro-Palestine movement. They hate anybody that would be, supporting Tucker Carlson or whatever. And they want to make the pro-Palestine movement as woke and rainbow flag and hostile to the American working class as possible. And so, yeah, I blame PSL. The death of Arab socialism, I don't blame that necessarily. I mean, it's complicated. I mean, Arab socialism, it's complicated. The USA promoted Islamism, and I mean, it's not exactly because of that. It's complicated. I think it's just the change in the world's dynamics. Arab socialism was a result of the Soviet Union existing. It was a result of patriotic officers within the nationalist Arab governments, and it's more complicated than that. I think it's mainly the main issue causing that is causing the confusion among right wingers. The main issue is that woke leftism is confused with communism, and people like PSL reinforce that, and right wingers refuse to just see the obvious reality that China and woke are not the same thing. So there we go. Next question. Thanks for rolling in the questions, folks. Gabby has sent another question. And Gabby, her next question is, when people say the Latin kings are defending immigrants from ICE, that is dangerous. Okay. Gangs are not liberation. They harm their own people too. The system loves this narrative because it lets them criminalize immigrants even more. We need real community power, not gangs being treated like protectors. Well, my position has always been that what ICE is doing is going to reinforce criminal gangs, right? Because if you can't cross the border legally, you have to get smuggled in, right? And if immigrant communities are afraid to call the police, then those kind of criminal organizations are going to flourish. there is an element on the left of romanticizing lumpen elements, right? That they have it in their head that criminal gangs and organizations like that, they're Robin Hoods fighting for the poor. And that's not true. Lumpen elements are desperate and they will work for anybody, and they will often be strike breakers. They will often, persecute radicals and stuff like that. And that's part of the new left deviance, is this romanticization of the lumpen elements of gangs and criminal organizations. Now, there were a lot of revolutionary organizations that deteriorated into criminal organizations. And that's the documentary film that was on HBO. It's actually very good. It's called Bastards of the Party, that talks about how, as a result of the Black Panther Party kind of being broken up, a lot of people that were involved in nationalist or Black activism kind of deteriorated into criminal organizations. And that's a little bit of a different matter. But yeah, there is this like fantasy, a lot of like, especially white hipster kids like fantasize that they're going to join a gang and that the gangs are the real revolutionaries. And it's a little messed up. And, there's a little bit of that with Frantz Fanon and some of the 1960s leftist stuff. All right. I am going to put some more music on. And if y'all want to send some more questions, that would be great. We're at the 2-hour mark. But, I've still got some energy. So if you want to hit me with some more questions, feel free. I did want to put on the screen, 2 of our friends are together in Russia. Garland Nixon and Scott Ritter. They are in Russia right now. And I think that's awesome. We love both of them. And I saw the picture of them in Red Square, and it was just a really, really nice image of the 2 guys. If I could just find that image, I will put it on the screen. Here we go. All right, let me put that image on the screen. It's a very nice image. 2 of our good friends, 2 people that have spoken at, they've spoken at multiple CPI conferences, Scott Ritter and Garland Nixon. They are right now together in Russia, and that's very cool. So yeah, this is them in Red Square with someone who's doing some kind of World War II reenactment. It's a really nice picture. Look at that. Look at our 2 good friends over in Russia. Isn't that great? Isn't that awesome? I think it's great. I think it's very, very, very cool. Very, very, very cool. Look at them. Scott Ritter, great anti-imperialist. Garland Nixon, another great anti-imperialist. 2 great friends of CPI, both of whom have spoken at CPI conferences. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. And yeah, there are a couple Rumble rants that have come in, and we do appreciate that. Yeah, we'll answer them. I'm going to put on some music. I think going to put on some music. But what music is Caleb going to put on? Right? That was my joke when I first moved to New York City. I joked about the trains. They'd say, well, Caleb, we're going to put on we're going to take the one train. I'm like, okay, we're going to take one train, but which one train are we going to take? Well, Caleb, we're going to take a train. Okay, I know we're going to take a train, but which train are we going to take? Well, Caleb, we're going to take El train. We're speaking Spanish. Caleb, we're going to take our train. We own a train? I thought that was very funny when I first moved to the city. Other people don't find it funny. But here's the German medley from Cornelius Cardew of him playing the German communist songs, and then I'll answer questions.
He was out in front, his fist was raised to strike them. Brigades were growing thick and fast to take the battle forward. The flag was red and the fight was on. For our sturdy comrade Tailman, raise your fist. Sound the alarm, the phony court has sentenced him to perish. But when the people of the world rise up to liberation, we'll snatch the axe that falls on him. For our sturdy comrade Tailman, this, but the traitors thought they had him. But news was spread at lightning speed, and world opinion freed him. The world awakes, indignation flames, for our sturdy comrade Tailman, raise your fist.
Spanish heaven spread their brilliant starlight high above our trenches in the plain. From the distance, morning comes to greet us, calling us to battle once again. Far off is our home, yet ready we stand. We're fighting and winning for you. Freedom! Freedom! We'll not yield a foot to Franco's fascists, even though the bullets fall like sleet. We'll stand those peerless men, our comrades, and for us there can be no retreat. Rome is our home, yet ready we stand. We're fighting and winning for you. Freedom! Freedom! The drums, ready the bayonets, forward march, victory our reward. With a scarlet banner smash their columns, Town Battalion ready forward march. And just because he's human, a man would like a little bite to eat. He wants no rule and a lot of talk that gives no bread and meat. Selective to the work that must be done. March on in the workers united, for you are a worker too. And just because he's human, he doesn't like a pistol to his head. He wants no servants under him and no boss over his head. Selective to the work that must be done. March on in the workers united, for you are a worker too. And just because he's human, the job is all he is on. The liberation of the working class must be led by workers alone. Selective to the work that must be done. March on in the workers united, for you are a worker.
Oh, very good. I did receive an urgent message from the people in the Minneapolis study group that just did the Khrushchevism reading study group in Minneapolis. So here we go. Oh, I guess it's loading. This is interesting. Okay, or maybe not. All right, that's weird. I've generally, when I have it, StreamYard is acting pretty weird on me. All right, well, maybe we'll get the video and maybe we won't. All right, that's all right. Yeah, I just tried to inload a video and now it's just sitting there. Well, I hope you all can still hear me. Oh, it's unresponsive. So now I'm going to exit the page. All right, I'm back. I've never had StreamYard mess up like that before. All right, well, here is the message. Let me try one more time. The message that was sent from the people who had the study group in Minneapolis. Here we go. It just doesn't like the video. I don't know what that's about. All right, well, now we know. We know that they don't like the video. All right, well, that's weird. All right, you're all still here, right? That's weird. Yeah, that's odd. Was going to show the video, but yeah, well, hey, what can you do? What can you do? All right, so let's start doing Rumble rants. Leo Messi says, how ethnic militias like the Kurds in the Middle East, the Mosquito Indians in the Nicaragua, and the Tibetans and Hmong in Laos are used to get leftists to support imperialism. Yeah, well, in a lot of countries, there's an anti-colonial revolution, and there is an ethnic group that is at odds with the anti-colonial government, and that becomes something that the CIA does, is it promotes the cause of this ethnic group against China or against Syria or against North Korea or against whoever. And I mean, that happens. That's just part of what happens. I mean, it's kind of par for the course, right? The Mosquito Indians were used against the Sandinistas. Free Tibet is like your favorite Hollywood cause. I guess part of the reason that leftists support it is because it's like exotic, right? Your typical, conservative, conservative evangelical Christian, maybe they've never heard of Tibet, but it's like, trendy Hollywood liberals that, say, oh, I want to free Tibet, right? So then they get involved in these kind of things, right? It's like you're viewed as worldly, knowing about world information, being interested in people of different cultures. It becomes a liberal thing. I remember years ago, there was I signed up to get like right-wing facts sent to me every day. One of the right-wing facts was tell your liberal friends that Tibet is just the same as the Nicaraguan Contra War. And it was true, right? It was, the Heritage Foundation published a whole book, The CIA's Secret War in Tibet. Yeah, the Tibet Civil War of the 1950s and the Tibet separatist movement and Ronald Reagan's Contra War in Nicaragua were about the same. The USA funded an ethnic group to fight against the communists, gave them guns and everything. And, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's just kind of a reality of how these games are played. Now, what's also interesting is that communist governments, anti-imperialist governments will often go out of their way to, nowadays, for example, in Nicaragua, there's a lot of autonomy on the part of the indigenous people. Like you have to get a special passport to go into indigenous territory. The indigenous people have a huge amount of autonomy, and that, they made mistakes, they felt, when they originally dealt with the Mosquito Indians. So now the government of Nicaragua has worked very, very hard, has worked very, very hard to make sure that, that they don't repeat those mistakes. And that, like, for example, like Ethiopia, right? There was Eritrea, broke away from Ethiopia. And some of the, when Ethiopia was the Kingdom of Ethiopia, the communists were leading the Eritrean resistance. And then after the Derg, the Marxist-Leninist military junta, took power in Ethiopia, there was a divide. And some of the Eritrean communists wanted just autonomy and like reached a deal with the Ethiopian government, and others did want to separate. And now Eritrea is separated. And it was actually the pro-China communists that fought. So, yeah, using different nationalities as, part of the political game, that's part of what goes on, unfortunately, in these kind of conflicts. And I mean, There's many examples of it. Now, the next question is, what is your opinion on W.E.B. Du Bois' thesis of the American Civil War as a representation of a proletarian revolution, i.e. a mass slave revolt affecting the course of the nation and the economy? I like what W.E.B. Du Bois has written about the American Civil War, in that labor unions were essential in mobilizing for the defeat of slavery, that all across the South, Black people stopped working as like a general strike across the South to stop supporting the war effort. The slaves largely stopped working because they wanted to not support, the Confederacy and slavery. And that Harriet Tubman was a slave revolutionary. It was liberating plantations across South Carolina. The U.S. Civil War was the Second American Revolution. And it was a great example of the American, industrial bourgeoisie of the North fighting against Wall Street and the British Empire to advance the living conditions of mankind. And the slave system was kept intact in the South by the British Empire. And that Northern industrial capital aligned with labor unions, aligned with slave revolutionaries, Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman. And, in the interest of society overall, you had the defeat of slavery. And it was kind of a united front. And that, that's actually some of the best work from the Communist Party is their writing on the U.S. Civil War. It's very, very good. W.E.B. Du Bois. And the woke people don't agree with it. And I'll just point that out. The woke people go out of their way to make it sound like slavery was good for the white working class, which it was not. It was good for the white slave owners, but for the white working class, they got lower pay. Slavery, drove down the wages. In fact, the wages of white workers in the South were exponentially lower than the wages of workers in the North because they were competing with people who worked for free, slaves. And that that there were just, many, many examples of how the defeat of slavery was a great example of a victory for the American working class against Wall Street, which was tied in with the British Empire. And that the British tried to send their navy to break the blockade during the war and send military aid to the Confederacy. So Russia sent their navy to the New York City harbor to scare away the British, and the British didn't intervene. And that, the struggle to defeat slavery was a progressive struggle. And this is something that a lot of so-called communists are very ignorant of, right? Marx was a huge supporter of Abraham Lincoln, literally was hired by the New York Tribune. August Willich was a German communist who became a general in the Union Army and was corresponding with Marx throughout the war. Marx was a big supporter of Lincoln. I mean, a huge supporter of Lincoln, wrote for the Republican Party newspaper in New York City. And a lot of people that are attracted to being communist because they want to be edgy and all of that get really mad. This idiot called Unholy Rome, who's some guy on the internet, has attacked me endlessly for pointing this out. And it's like, he's called me a Nazi for saying that Lincoln and Marx were allies. He said, and all of this. And it's just like, the Nazis support the Confederacy, dude. Like, look up Charlottesville. And like, you being mad at me for saying it doesn't change reality. The Union Army got a huge amount of support from Marx. There was literally a communist division of the Union Army in the Civil War. It was called the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment. It was all German immigrants led by August Willich and Joseph Wedemeyer. And they were communist German immigrants who fought on the Union side. There was an anti-slavery rally put on by the International Working Men's Association in London. And Abraham Lincoln sent a message, a letter to Karl Marx's group, had a rally against slavery in London. And Lincoln wrote a message and basically wrote a speech to be read at the rally. Like, Lincoln and Marx were close. They were politically aligned. They didn't agree with each other. Lincoln was not a communist. He was a Bonapartist, capitalist. But they were on the same side. That is true. And this Unholy Rome guy, who's some big guy with, Blackout Network or whatever, he just has, in his response, whenever you just start unloading the facts on him, he attacked me for saying it. I just showed all the facts. And his response is to call me a white supremacist and call me a Nazi and all these things. Like, some things are true and some things are not, right? I could be the worst person in the world and still say true things. But what it really gets down to is his leftism is satanic, right? He's a leftist because he hates America. And he, like the idea that Abraham Lincoln, someone who's a loved leader in American history, was close to Marx, he wouldn't be a Marxist then, because he was a Marxist because he wants to burn America down and he wants to tear it down, right? And it's like that ruins people's satanic leftism. They're leftists because they want to show how much they hate the country and how much they want to destroy it. And that's why they'll never get any place. That's why we're not communists in CPI anymore. We're innovationists, because it's like these people they can't even agree with Karl Marx because they hate America so much. They're wrapped up. They're doing this teenage LARP, one of these people, Jason Unruhe, has also had a meltdown about Lincoln. And on one of the streams, I think one of Jason Unruhe, the Maoist Rebel News guys, rants against me, is they said, well, Caleb, the way slavery was defeated is they told black people, okay, we'll let you be free, but we won't give you any rights. And there was no struggle to defeat slavery. Bullshit. Harper's Ferry, John Brown, there was a huge struggle. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people died. It was, but they just, no, it just doesn't fit their narrative. America is an evil, racist country, and that's it. And it's just, that's how these people are. And you can't, it's one thing to take a black nationalist stance, to feel that black people have the right to be separate or whatever, but to say that there was no struggle to defeat slavery, and to say that Lincoln and Marx couldn't have been allies because America's evil, right? Look, and dude, I don't know who you are, but it's like, yeah, maybe this guy does great things. Why does he have to be an asshole to me just for knowing facts, right? It is true that Lincoln and Marx were friends. This guy attacks me viciously, calls me all kinds of names for knowing stuff, right? So no, that's not okay. I don't know what he does. I bet he's really nice to his grandma and, buys cookies for his, for little children. And, maybe he takes puppies out to the park and feeds them or something. But in my interactions with him, this guy's a piece of shit, right? I did nothing to him. I never criticized him. I never said anything. And he posts on this big attack on me. You support Lincoln. And I reply to it, and his response is, patriotic socialism is the same as national socialism. You're Hitler. I don't care if this guy's nice. You know what I mean? And that's the thing. It's like, some things are true, and it's like, it's attacking me for saying true things. And that's what I don't get. All these people are defending him. And it's like, I don't know, maybe this guy, is Dudley Do-Right. Maybe he, rescues cats from trees. Maybe he, but he doesn't have to attack me and call me a bad person for saying something that's true, right? And that's a nasty thing to do. And he can go fuck himself, and I don't get this. I really don't get this. Like, why would that make you mad, right? That Marx and Lincoln were aligned politically. I just laid out the facts. Why does that make you mad? And why would anyone feel a need to call me a Nazi just for fucking pointing that out, right? And that's how these people are. Right? It's, it's they want to feel satanic. They want to feel angry. They want to feel that they're against America. And if you point out that one of our most beloved presidents and the founder of scientific socialism were allies, that just ruins it for them, because they're just having a temper tantrum against the world, right? And I don't know. Maybe this guy's a really nice guy. I don't care. Don't be an asshole to me, how would you feel? How would you feel, right? If somebody punched you in the nose randomly on the street, and then you said, hey, this guy punched me in the nose, and people are like, oh, but Caleb, this guy rescued an old woman from a burning building. Well, that's nice. I'm glad he did that. He still shouldn't have fucking punched me in the nose. And I don't get this, no need for calling me a Nazi just for pointing out history. Right. And it's just like, if this guy's a good guy, then he should realize that I'm not a bad person for saying historically true things about the history of the United States. It drives me crazy. It really does. And I don't know who this guy is, and I don't care. Right. His interaction with me has been to attack me publicly to get points. When I was being ganged up on by Thought Slime and all these pro-NATO, pro-imperialist leftists, he wanted to get popular with them, so he dogpiled onto me too. And there's so many people who do this, right? is that, and they're people that the reason I'm being targeted is because I was a reporter for RT. It's because I've met President Putin. That's why they've dogpiled onto me. And they admitted that at the beginning. He's a Nazbol. He works with Putin. But fucking so many of these people, it's a way to get ahead on social media. They don't care about why I'm being targeted. They just want to get ahead on social media. So the memo goes out, and how's that any different? It's awful. These are the kind of people that would have supported the Holocaust. Well, it's not me being thrown in the gas chamber, so I can get ahead. That's how they are, right? I'm being targeted and smeared and defamed and all of that because I'm anti-imperialist. And these people claim to be anti-imperialist too, but they can get ahead. So, fuck them, right? Fuck them. That's the problem with social media. It's all a big contest. It's all about me, right? We supported the Uhuru movement when they got raided by the FBI. Where was he? Right? Where was he? Right? If he's such a great black activist, why was he not in front of the federal courthouse in Tampa with the Uhuru movement? Why was he not there? Right? I guess he was too busy looking in the mirror and being famous on the internet and trying to cancel me to get points for it. So fuck this guy. Right? And that's the thing, right? We didn't advance the Uhuru movement because we wanted to get points for it. We wanted to be popular. We did it because it was the right thing to do. Because if they attack somebody, right, you support them. But but these people, these influencers, all they care about is being famous on the internet. That's all they care about. It's about me. And if somebody else is being canceled, they dogpile. They join the dogpile because that'll advance them, right? And they don't get it, right? They don't get it. And that's why we need to get beyond this internet stuff. I'm on here streaming. We have our community, but, the influencer crowd are really, really awful, right? Yeah, and yeah, people are confirming they were weak about Uhuru. Yeah, well, how would that make them more internet famous? Would that get them more likes and clicks and shares? No, right? That's all they care about. So I'm somebody who's being canceled. And so he just invented a reason to cancel me. And it wasn't even historically true. Anyone who says, his post was like, anyone who says Marx and Lincoln have anything in common is retarded or something. And I said, and he was clearly referring to me. And I said, that's not true. And then he started calling me a Nazi, right? How do you have respect for people like that, right? You don't have to do that, right? And, but it's like, he just can't, I don't know. Anyway, I could rant about that. This is negative. We're better than this. W.B. Du Bois. Read W.B. Du Bois. Did you see Max Blumenthal's documentary about Jews in Iran? I would say yes. They are communist in the best sense. Who is communist, Kinkle? I have seen some of Max's work about that, and I've been to Iran. I visited a synagogue in Iran, in Mashhad, I think. I visited a synagogue. There are Jews in Iran who practice their religion. They can't support Israel, though. It is illegal in Iran to support Israel, but there are anti-Israel Jews in Iran. In fact, there were some of the Neturei Karta people. Some of them, they have tried to move to Iran because it's a place where they can be. There are a few places where Neturei Karta, they can't be in Israel because they don't support Israel, and they can't be in Arab countries. So, like, where are they going to go? So a lot of the Neturei Karta Jews have at least expressed interest in moving to Iran. So there we go. Oh, Gabby, you got more questions for me. That's okay. Celia Cruz wasn't a sellout. She was exiled because she refused to support Castro's government. Novellas and media exaggerate this, but the truth is the state punished artists who didn't obey. Celia loved Cuba. She just didn't want her voice controlled yet again. She probably sold out to become famous. I'm not sure I agree with you there. I haven't studied her case, but, there are plenty of artists in Cuba who are critical of the government. And in fact, one thing, when people go to Cuba is they meet with dissident artists. And, there was one group of people who went to Cuba, and they met with a group of artists who said they were being persecuted by the government. They said, we're dissident artists, we're being persecuted by the government. And how were they being persecuted? The government wasn't paying them. Wasn't paying them to do their art. All right, they weren't being thrown in jail. They weren't being censored. It's just in Cuba, they do have a program that if you're an artist, the government will pay you. But if you're making art that is against the government, against the Communist Party, they don't pay you. And that's how she was being persecuted. So I mean, and there's plenty. There was the Cuban hip hop movement that was really big in the 2000s, and there's a lot of people in Cuba that are very critical of the government. Now, I don't know Celia Cruz and all that, and at one time in Cuba, it was a little bit more rigid, right? In the 60s and stuff, in the 60s and 70s, but things in Cuba are a little bit different. But so I really don't know. Ellie actually is probably a good person to ask about that. She's very familiar with the situation in Cuba, but I'm not sure I agree with you. But I respect your opinion, Gabby, as always. But I tend to think, that, when people flee to America to talk shit against Cuba, I just, it's one thing, if people leave their country for any other reason, but yeah, and when people, I mean, there's a lot of like Cubans who get medical degrees in Cuba and then they flee to the United States and practice medical stuff, right? You know how much it costs to go to medical school in America? They get a free medical education. And then they come to America and practice medicine with that free medical education. And they say, oh, I was so oppressed in Cuba. It's like, really? Okay. There you go. But, Cuba has issues and there's a blockade and it's, not everything in life is black and white. And, and there are people, there are people who've left Cuba because they can't do what they want to do there. And part of that's because of the blockade. And sometimes it's because of the political system. These things are more complicated. I tend to be sympathetic with the Cuban government as being against imperialism, but they admit they've made mistakes. So, it's complicated. You might be right, actually. I don't know. I'm not sure I'm ready to agree with you 100%. So, yeah, there you go. There you go. There you go. All right, folks. Well, my voice is starting to fade, and I do have to get up early in the morning. So I'm gonna say goodbye for now. But thank you everybody. For some reason I got a little bit bitter towards the end of the stream. I try not to do that. But we're doing great things. In the opening tonight, I was trying to be, and I think we had kind of an inspiring message about how to be heroic and all of that. And we're actually doing really well right now as an organization. CPI, in terms of our outreach operations, in terms of our international connections, in terms of building this event. Please, if you are in the New York, New Jersey area, please register and come to our event to kick off the new year. We are going to have a great event in New Jersey. It's going to be absolutely tremendous. I'm really looking forward to it. So go ahead and register for this event. It's going to be good. Speeches, music, all of that. It's going to be good. Full buffet, everything. Checkpoint Charlie, you should register. You're in the area. If people are in the area, if you're in the New York, New Jersey area, we are trying, we can provide transportation. You just have to get in touch. We do want to get as many people there as possible. It's important to have events and stuff. So go ahead and register for the event if you can make it. We'd love to have you there. It's going to be a great way to kick off the new year. We got some great stuff going on, and we're building an anti-imperialist movement, and it's difficult, but we're doing it. And yeah. Oh, we do want to, before we go, we're going to show a video from Penny, made in Burkina Faso, about some of Burkina Faso's development, how they're building up their economy. Yeah, we'll show that. Hold on. Hold your horses. We're going to show a video about Burkina Faso. This is about, Penny is very good at following what the anti-colonial governments around the world are doing. And that's one great thing that Penny does, is she keeps up to date on Burkina Faso and the great African leader Ibrahim Traore, who we've been supporting in CPI. We've had rallies, about Ibrahim Traore, and we published this great book that Penny wrote, Africa's Flame: The Rise of Ibrahim Traore. Really, really great stuff. So yeah, we will put that video on about Burkina Faso's projects, how they're building up their economy and creating opportunities. They have a government of action that fights for working families in Burkina Faso, an anti-colonial government. Ibrahim Traore is a great African leader who's fighting for his people. Yeah, we'll put that video on. Hold your horses, right? Hold your horses, right? We're going to put on Made in Burkina Faso. So there we go. All right. Made in Burkina Faso, sharing this video about the great anti-colonial leader Ibrahim Traore and his great important work. Hold on.
Promoting the know-how of communities in Burkina Faso in the field of gastronomy. The ministerial department in charge of the economy is playing its part today. On October 29th, the official launch ceremony of local consumption days took place under the initiative of the ministry. Here is the report from ICIA Kanana.
From tomato paste made in Burkina Faso, which is selling like hotcakes, tomatoes from the Asofado factory, which Ms. Pascaline Kogo came to buy to enhance her cooking.
We find that the prices are affordable for consumers, for the average Burkinabe. So we really appreciate it. This government initiative to make quality products available to the population that are accessible to everyone.
Here, local products. There are straws, cocodondas, and fasos from Amphane that catch the attention of notable visitors. Over there, pre-cooked dried leaves and legumes, which also draw admiration.
We offer pre-cooked leaf sauces like pre-cooked babenla, kumvando, and sauce with wings and peanuts. You also have legumes like sumo, zamnen, and pre-cooked non. Besides the pre-cooked products, we also offer instant juices. You can find Oshata with dates, Oshata Energy.
Products grown and processed by Burkinabe producers and artisans showcased here during this local consumption day. A day initiated by the Ministry of Economy and Finance to promote Burkinabe products while strengthening the local economy.
Consuming local products is not just a slogan, it should become a habit. We have to make it happen. Every time we want to buy a product, we should ask ourselves, first of all, the question is this product already made in Burkina? If yes, we choose it, we make that choice before importing. So today, we are very happy to see such strong engagement around this month dedicated to local consumption, which is perfectly in line with the President's vision regarding the issue of sovereignty. Because sovereignty also means sovereignty over the consumption of products, so that we focus on the products we make here. And today, we really have tremendous potential that needs to be showcased. We have artisans who are very creative. We have many local producers who make our country proud, and we must work to promote them.
Producing and consuming locally for food sovereignty in Burkina Faso. An enthusiasm and conviction also shared by the Minister of State, the Minister of Agriculture, Animal and Aquatic Resources, and the Minister in charge of the Environment all came to support the initiative.
The Burkinabe are growing. The movement is gaining momentum. This is just the engine warming up, so the real action is yet to come. At the Ministry of the Environment, there are battles being prepared, so we invite you to always be magicians. Because if you are magicians, consuming local products will truly make sense. We will have rice from our valleys. We will have water produced locally. We will have our non-timber forest products processed right here. We will consume and export.
Consuming local products as an expression of patriotic spirit and the foundation of Burkina Faso's economic and social development is the main focus of this day. A day whose tone was set this morning through this display of national colors.
Yeah, that's really great. That's really awesome. And it looks like I finally they sent another file of the from the reading group. You know, they did a reading group of the Khrushchevism book, and this is Tom and Gary and Penny from their reading group they did this evening.
Mr. Chambers, don't get on that ship! The book to serve man! It's a cookbook!
Yeah. No, I referenced that's chapter 2 of the Khrushchevism book that we're studying is called It's a Cookbook, a reference to the classic Twilight Zone episode. I might have that clip here somewhere, right? Yeah, they were reenacting the classic TV moment, It's a Cookbook. It's a cookbook from the Twilight Zone, right? For those of you who don't know, you know, that was a classic TV moment where there's these aliens who come to Earth and they're doing really nice things. They're feeding people, they're taking care of people, and they do it because they have this book and it's called To Serve Man. And they're doing all these nice things and all this. And then they're going to take some humans back to the home planet. And so they're lining up to get on the spaceship. And this one woman has been translating the book To Serve Man. And then she realizes To Serve Man, it's a cookbook, right? And that was, you know, it was To Serve Man. That was, you know, it was like serve the people, which was the slogan of the Chinese Communist Party. And it expresses that kind of paranoia there can't be anything good in this world, right? It's all a cookbook, right? And that's kind of the mindset that Cold War liberalism promoted, right? They went away from McCarthyism to Cold War liberalism, the idea that all mass movements are totalitarian and all of that. And that's chapter 2 of the Khrushchevism book. We are pushing this book internally because this book is organizational technology, right? It's preparing people for what an organization will be hit with inevitably. And that, if we're going to build an illiberal anti-imperialist organization in America, we need to be prepared for all the tricks of the enemy. And that's why we're having the internal reading groups and hitting this book hard. And it's been very successful. In LA, they're doing the reading groups. We've had national reading groups, Chicago, Minneapolis. And we're studying this book so that we will be solid as a rock, solidify against Khrushchevism. Actually, we referred to the campaign in our book of the proceedings, the convention proceedings. We have a page about the Khrushchevism campaign, right? Solidify against Khrushchevism. Was it Stalin said, I know that after my death, a pile of rubbish will be placed upon my grave with, so there you go. All right. Yeah, that's the Khrushchevism campaign is a really important part of holding our organization together. Good stuff. So, good stuff. All right. Well, listen, folks, it's approaching midnight and I do need to sleep and, got church in the morning, etc. So I am going to finally put on the closing music. You all are great. We're doing great stuff here. See you in New Jersey, January 11th. And, I guess we'll put on the closing music and dare to struggle, dare to win. We are winning and we are doing great stuff. CPI is marching ahead at this point. I am delighted with how our organization is swinging into action. Dare to struggle, dare to win. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.